Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Aparuta de sangamatasa tawaraye sodavanta mamunjantu satang. So this is an opportunity to reflect, contemplate Dhamma here and now. These are not doctrinal teachings which you're expected to believe or deny, but to reflect upon. And that is the ability to not just say yes or no, true or false, but contemplate how those words affect you. Because words do affect us very strongly. So we use, when we curse somebody, they feel it. And when we praise somebody, they feel that in a different way. So there's pleasure and pain and happiness and suffering according to so many conditions that we are subjected to in these sensory forms. So this is like Buddha's teachings, the Dhamma, what we call the Dhamma teachings. I think it's important to realize they're not doctrines, what Buddha said we had to believe in. They're directional signs. So this is all of his teachings are not about what you should believe if you're going to be a Buddhist. In fact, the Buddha never taught Buddhism. Buddhism developed after the demise of the historical Buddha. But he's teaching Dhamma, the way things are. And this is like a great opportunity for us in this lifetime, in the forms that we are experiencing here and now, to reflect on reality, what is really true or not true, what you can know directly, what you just accept because everybody believes the same thing. So of the three signs, anicca, dukkha, anatta, impermanence, is anicca, dukkha, unsatisfactoriness or suffering, anatta, non-self. Anatta is the most difficult, the most challenging, and most important. So, I've heard Buddhists say you have to believe there's no self. And it's not a demand, then it becomes a doctrinal belief that you believe there's no self because it's in the scriptures. Or somebody tells you that you have to believe that. But it's a characteristic of phenomena. Phenomena, sankhara, conditions, the born, the created, the formed. These are all impermanent. Now that's something to reflect upon in your own experience. Have you found something permanent in your thoughts, in your physical experience, in the bodies that you tend to identify with? There's something permanent about your eyes, ears, nose, tongue, feelings of pleasure, pain. And so much of human society looks for permanent stability in the very conditions that are anicca, impermanent, and dukkha, unsatisfying, unsatisfactory. Because even the best of life, the best of the sensory world that we can imagine or experience, is in the process of change, inexorable change. And so this is to be observed. Even though we can agree with that, and it's a reasonable statement to make and something to believe in, but to really observe change. So the body changes, doesn't it, according to the time of day, whether you're asleep or sitting, standing, walking, whether you're feeling healthy or sick, whether it's hot or cold, how dependent we are physically, trying to live in a cold climate, to keep warm and survive just on a physical level. So it's the northern countries, northern Europeans developed all ways of survival, preserving food, cheese, sausages, salting foods, things that in the tropics you don't need to bother with. So I remember living in Sabah, North Borneo, years ago, and how easy life, for people to survive there. Fish in the ocean. You can just go into the jungles and gather tapioca, kind of potato-like foods, grow rice, fruits abundant. Why do they need to preserve things or, develop ways to survive during the winter? Because you hardly notice that there's any change in the seasons in the equatorial countries on this planet. But here in England, in Northern Europe, this is the way it is. So human civilization had to, in order to make their bodies survive extreme temperatures, to develop techniques of survival. But that's all due to because the different areas of the planet are changing. So we have seasons. Even in equatorial countries you have seasons, but they're not as clearly defined as they are here. So like seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, is so dependent upon architecture, on things being a certain way to create proper reception of sound. We have incense to create fragrances in places where there are neither any fragrant essences around, or the odors are not pleasant. So anicca and dukkha are quite obvious. It didn't take much even the beginning, before I became a monk, to easily comprehend anicca, impermanence, and dukkha, unsatisfactoriness of the sense realms. And then anatta, I remember that was really, I always felt that even in my meditations that there was something that was knowing. So when you see through the impermanence, have insight into impermanence and unsatisfactoriness, there's a knowing of impermanence and unsatisfactoriness. So what is that? all I could do is say it's me, Sumedho, knowing, or whatever name I happen to be using at the time. So it's this sense of me and mine was quite dominant. Why, it seemed to be I had no other way of interpreting the experience of knowing impermanence is like this, unsatisfactoriness is like this. So what is it that knows? Is it impermanent? Is it a condition? And this is, of course, this is the ultimate question that seems to confuse everybody, is what is no self? Rather, if it's not annihilation, you're seeing the impermanence of the ego, of memories, of feelings, pleasure and pain, kaya, vedana, sanya, sankhara. Vijnana through the senses is impermanent, because the senses are themselves impermanent, changing conditions. So if consciousness is impermanent, then what is it that is aware of impermanence, that has insight, that has jhana, dasana, insight, profound insight into the reality? Is it sensory consciousness? Is it just belief in Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha? What is it that knows the present moment is like this? And yet in terms of sensory consciousness, it changes. So we get caught up in the changing conditions that we hold to, this clinging, this identity we form with conditioned phenomena, with that which is impermanent, unsatisfying. So no wonder the suffering is such a noble truth, because it's so obvious. It's not a depressing fact, like Buddhists have to believe that everything's suffering. Whatever word you want to use for dukkha, suffering or unsatisfactoriness or whatever, it doesn't matter. It just conveys that it's unpleasant, it's unwanted. We don't want dukkha, we don't want suffering. We'd like springtime like this, to have Amaravati in a permanent splendor of spring with beautiful trees and flowers, green grass, warm weather, where everything is pleasant. So we have, when we create images of paradise or utopia, everything is, we can imagine perfection. Everything is perfect, the sun shines always, it's permanently spring, the weather's not too hot, not too cold, abundance of food, good health, physical comforts, ease, all the best that you can imagine of a sense realm, but they're images, aren't they? They're images of perfection, and images are impermanent. Imagination is impermanent. So it's this, in bhavana or meditation, it's really reminding ourselves constantly of this, the way it is, not the way you imagine it should be, or want it to be, or don't want it to be, but whatever, whether it's winter time, when it's spring, summer, fall, it's like this. So what is it that knows at this moment is like this? This is knowing, isn't it? It's direct knowing. It's not corrupted by clinging to conditions. When you want to find someone who knows, who is it that knows? What is it that knows? You can't find anybody. But there's knowing that we all know this directly. It's direct. It's not abstract. It's not theoretical. So this is to see this for yourself. Bajjitang vetida povinui, to be experienced individually by the wise. So knowing isn't about whether it's pleasant, unpleasant, whether it's summer or spring, whether you feel healthy or sickly. It's not, it doesn't take a form or a side, or it doesn't attach to anything, but it knows very clearly that this moment can only be like this. And that, you might say, is a fact. It's provable. Can you imagine at this moment that it should be different? You can imagine it should be different. But that's it's like this reality. Imagining this moment to be something other than what it is. But what is it at this moment for each one of us? It's like this, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant, whether you're confused or you believe or you question or you agree or don't agree. Whatever reaction, emotional reaction, physical reaction you have to this kind of reflection, it's the way it is. So it's not about agreeing with me or trying to argue the points with me, but understanding this is what you can trust, this awareness here and now that doesn't take sides, isn't extreme, has no reference points. You can't find it as an object. It has no objective reality. But it's present here and now. Whatever you want to, you don't have to call it anything, but just trust that this knowing in the present is like this. So in emotions, we're emotional creatures. So we react to praise and blame, success and failure, happiness and suffering, because the emotional experiences are can be pleasant or unpleasant. So when we talk about greed, hatred, and delusion as the three obstructions, the defilements, greed is and we believe that we shouldn't be greedy, being samanas. The ideal bhikkhu, the imagined ideal monk or nun is not greedy. That's an imagined monk or nun, that's not the way things are. Because these are greedy forms. These forms, these physical forms need to be fed, need protection, need warmth, need something to wear, need some place to live. We're very needy in the terms of the sense experiences that we have in these human forms. Survival, isn't it? Just this mammalian condition of humanity. It's an animal condition, survival. Sexual desire is natural, it's primal, it's a procreation of the species, so the forms of male and female, to procreate the species. This is just primal energies of conditioned phenomena that we can be aware of. But when we take it personally, then we suffer a lot. We idolize the ideal samana, having no sexual desires, being free from all greed, being contented with the requisites as provided daily. That's the ideal samana. So ideal samanas are ideas. But the reality of this moment is this physical form sitting here is not an ideal form. It's not like the Buddha Rupa behind me, which is idealized form, perfection in form. But this is the reality of having eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, a mind that thinks and feels happy or sad, depending on conditions. Ideals don't depend on conditions. They're beautiful. The ideals you form when you're a teenager can still ideal when you're 100 years old. Ideals are perfect, but they are empty phenomena. They're not reality. So when we, idealistic people suffer a lot because you can never be an ideal person, an ideal monk or nun, an ideal samana, even though you may try. But that even trying to become an ideal in a form is futile. Because it's impossible, because the forms, these physical forms, are not ideals. Our emotions are not ideal emotions. They're just metta and compassion, mudita, sympathetic joy, tranquility, equanimity, upekkha. These are, beautiful ideals. But when we try to feel metta for all sentient beings, what is it that is trying to feel metta for all sentient beings? What are all sentient beings at this moment when we're sitting here? What is loving kindness in the reality of it, of this moment? Even though we should have metta for all sentient beings, that's part of our vocabulary. What should be, or ideals, or goals to reach. So modern society is just filled with these ambitious goals, and religion is full of projecting ideals onto their reality. So this is like, it's nothing wrong with that. Ideals are not something you shouldn't have. But to know what they are impermanent conditions. They're thoughts, imagination, they're images in the mind. And they can be beautiful images, or you can be filled with fear, ghosts, phantoms, all kinds of unknown monsters. You can imagine anything, on an evil level of the universe, the forces of evil in the universe, trying to destroy evil in the universe, trying to create heaven in society. that is changing and dependent on so many conditions that you can't, all you can do is imagine a perfect democratic society. So what is it that imagines, that creates the words and language and concepts? You can be aware of that. What you believe in is like this. It's not judging it. It's not about you should not believe in anything. It's not, that's another belief. So if you're thinking, you should get rid of all beliefs, that's another belief, another interpretation, rather than mindful that getting rid of belief is like this, that you should get rid of anger, hatred. You've got to conquer the kilesas, the defilements. You as a separate person, a form, in the changing conditions that's dependent on so many other conditions, have to annihilate anger. Sexual desire, you have to completely annihilate that. Greed in any of its forms. Like some monks feel guilty about being hungry because they think, I'm greedy because I want to eat. And this is because this is a thought, isn't it, that we create about the natural condition of these human forms that need sustenance, need something to eat. So we identify with anger, hatred, sexual desire, and we have certain cultural projections onto these primal conditions, that this realm that we're experiencing in these sensory forms, we're actually creating idea, how it should be an ideal, rather than awakening to the way it is, that having a human form is like this. It's hungry. From the day you're born, you have to be fed. Your mother has to feed you. You can't feed yourself when a newborn infant. So you're dependent on mother. Is that ideal? Is that an ideal baby? But we don't expect babies to be perfect samanas without greed, hatred, or delusion. We can't project that on because they're innocent, learning, forms in consciousness. So the Buddha, pointing to the way this human state is, it's like this. There's nothing stable in it. There's nothing to believe in. Because what words themselves are unstable. Concepts, objects, the thinking process, emotional habits, they're all changing conditions depending upon other conditions. But what is it that knows this? So this is like insight. Jnana, we use this Pali word. It's insight knowledge. It's not knowing about everything. It's not like how we interpret omniscience, knowing everything about everything. That's another ideal, an imagined state of some deity. But we can know, whatever state we're in, whatever time of day, and whatever you're experiencing in terms of physical pleasure or pain, it's like this. And so this is this sense of open receptivity. Is that a self? Can you deny you don't know? You can say, I don't know, nobody knows. But the reality of knowing isn't personal. It's not a person knowing. So don't take it personally, don't take your life personally. Because there is actually no real person to be serious about. Personalities change. So in this particular tradition, Rinpoche is always emphasizing Puto as a reflective kind of word. Buddha, it means awakened consciousness. Like consciousness, as we experience through the senses, is changing, uncertain, unstable. But consciousness itself, is it dependent on senses? And so in the scriptures there's this statement, there is consciousness invisible, without limits, splendid, being everywhere, or however you want to interpret Vinyanang Anidasanang. It's deathless. It has no beginning or end. Vinyanang Anidasanang Anantang Sapado Bhavang. Translate that into English terms. Vijnana consciousness, Anantang, invisible. Anidasanang, deathless, has no beginning or end. It's no object. You can't find it. But you are that. That's your Puto refuge. So you begin to trust that, or take confidence in this knowing, which isn't knowing anything, isn't analyzing or thinking or judging about anything. It has no language of its own. So any language, no matter how brilliant it might be, can't reach it, can only point to it. So we have this word Dhamma in this tradition, Pali tradition, apparent here and now. So it's not, apparent here and now is not, what can that be? When you think about what is apparent here and now, at any time of the day or night is going to change. What you sense, your sense experiences are going to change. So not right now, it's like this. And this is knowing with wisdom from this Vinyanang Anidasanang Anantang Sapado Bhavang. So this Dhamma, which we translate as ultimate reality or the truth. These are abstract words that do the best you can to apply them to apparent here and now. But inevitably, you have to let go of language and words and thoughts, because they can only veil the truth, veil Dhamma. The word Dhamma itself is another condition that can be skillfully used or blindly believed in. So when we take refuge in Dhamma, we can do it blindly, whatever that is. Dhammang saranang gacchami, I take refuge in the Dhamma. What does that really mean in terms of here and now? So Dhamma is where? What are you taking refuge in? Dhamma is a Pali language, foreign language, an ancient language. It's not modern psychology, modern science. So when you take refuge in Dhamma, so the word itself is a skillful means only. Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha are skillful means. And they begin and end, arise and cease. And so just the word Dhamma, think the word Dhamma to yourself, it goes very quickly. 2 syllables, and it's gone. But there's still knowing, there's still conscious knowing. It's like this. So Dhamma then is the word we use for ultimate reality or reality. Whether it's not about ultimate, makes it sound that there's other kinds of reality. There's worldly reality and ultimate reality. Then this is the thinking process, isn't it? Where we divide into Lokuttara Dhamma, above the world, and Lokiya Dhamma, worldly wisdom, worldly knowledge. These are thoughts, concepts. And there's nothing wrong with them, so it's not about right or wrong, but it's just recognizing the limitation of the thinking that we're addicted to. We're actually addicted to the thinking that we've been conditioned with after we were born. So perfection, completeness, oneness, the totality, ultimate reality, you can call it God. Some religions they use God or Allah, different names for it. Dhamma, in this particular tradition, is here and now. And so when we take refuge in that, it's not just taking refuge in some metaphysical concept that we've acquired through reading scripture, Buddhist scriptures, but we begin to awaken to reality, to Dhamma itself. It's like this. So if you want to know your true nature, that's what you truly are, what you can trust. What you take refuge in is awareness here and now. So that's when I say you're not what you think, because what you think is not reality. And we call it conventional reality, samut satcha in Thai, but it is still changing. Whatever you think you are as a separate person, as a separate form, as a monk or a nun, a male or female, a layman, an agarika, samanera. These are conventions. Now, how do we use those conventions? As identities, to forms, as our reality? Is Amaravati our reality, monastic life, Theravada Buddhism? Or is all this pointing at awakened awareness here and now? 20.Dhamma. So when we take our stand with 20.Dhamma, consciousness is not personal, it's anatta. The forms are self, different forms, but consciousness is unitive, universal, complete, perfection. In this term of vinyanang anidasanang anantang sapado bhava. So if you really want to know what you are, whatever you think about yourself as being good or bad, right or wrong, well-adjusted, neurotic, male or female, what nationality, what sexual identity you believe you identify with, is very changeable now. At this time in modern society, mass media talk endlessly about transgender, homosexuals, lesbian, gay. And so these are identities that we tend to, they're conditions that we attach to and experience life through these veils of delusion, when what we truly are is this awareness itself. Trust it. It's not objective, you can't find it because trying to look at yourself, you can't do it. Your eyes can't see themselves. Consciousness can't see itself as an object. So when modern scientists, psychologists are looking to find consciousness in the brain, and they're looking for organs of consciousness. Is it consciousness of the brain? And are dogs conscious? Are worms, are amoebas conscious? We can argue about that because amoebas conscious. They're pretty low life compared to us human beings who are much more advanced forms of creation. We have it's a very arrogant species, humanity, thinking it's better than all the rest. Racial identities, what are these? Are they reality or just conventions? So this is where we begin to question and look into the way things are. That it is, everything is impermanent. Everything, a thing is a condition, a sankhara. So every single thing, using English grammar, is impermanent. But what isn't impermanent? Is Dhamma impermanent? When we take refuge in apparent here and now, is consciousness or Dhamma? Is it impermanent? Consciousness through senses, experience consciousness through these forms, these sensory forms, is our reality. What I see, hear, smell, taste, touch, feel is real for me as a personality. But when we really investigate, examine, there is no person. Everything I've ever thought about myself as a person changes, come and go according to other conditions. Every identity that I've clung to as an American or as a Buddhist monk, every convention that I've formed a view about myself with that particular convention is investigated, and it's condition, it's convention. But when I try to find me as a separate individual, I can't find anything. So I still live within a form. The form's still, good enough to carry on for a few more years. But it's an old form, it's going to die. So then the ego, the Sakya Ditti, says, I'm going to die. I don't want to die, or I want to die. Some people want to die. Others want to live forever. But when they're you as a form, that's admitted that the human body can only last so long. And it really, gets very old and sickly, weak. Do you want to live in these old forms till you're 200 years old? It's rather ridiculous. Death is like liberation from the form, a physical form, rather than some frightening, unknown experience that we dread. Because if our soul identity is with conditioned phenomena, we've never looked at any deeper than the way what we like or don't like, agree with or disagree with. Then death is a mystery, isn't it? What happens when you're dead? Do I have a separate soul, an Ajahn Sumedho separate soul that will be reborn again, or will I just disappear into oblivion as a soul, because I'm identified with personality, with emotion, with this sense of separateness that give this illusion of separateness. But our refuge now is in Dhamma, conscious awareness, timeless awareness, here and now. Dhammang saranang gacchami, it comes easily off the lips to think it and become a habit. But the reality of it is here and now. And to take one stand, to trust in this awareness, is the path of the deathless reality of knowing the way things are. So isn't it kind of different to think of perfection as like this, the simple reality of knowing in the present, rather than all the complicated identities and emotional problems and fears and desires and habit patterns that we've developed in our lifetime that we tend to judge as good or bad, right or wrong. There's no end to that. It goes on, an endless kind of proliferating judgments, value judgments. So as a separate self, it is hopeless. You just hope that if I led a moral and generous life, I'll be reborn in a higher realm in the next life. That's a belief. We can believe that. We can believe that once you're dead, there's nothing left. It's just oblivion, total voidness. That's a belief. Voidness is a word. Emptiness is a word. But is apparent here and now. Those are words too, but they're pointing to the reality that we actually are, this awareness, present, 20.Dhamma, timeless reality, timeless awareness here and now is like this. And as you learn to trust this awareness, then there's no suffering in the moment of 20.Dhamma. When you notice you suffer about the future or the past, worrying about tomorrow or next year, worrying about death, worrying about your family, worrying about Brexit, worrying about political situation, worrying about the pandemic. It's all, worry is about conceptualizing. We create worry, and it's about the future. In the future, anything's imaginable. There's never an end to the COVID pandemic. It's going to go on and on. We'll be locked down for 1,000 years at least. We can imagine the most horrible scenarios. You can imagine death is really, if you've committed a sin, you'll go to hell. You can believe that. Or you can believe there's no hell or heaven, it's just oblivion. These are all beliefs that we tend to grasp without investigating them. It's a real shift to trust in awareness, because the thinking mind doesn't trust it at all. When you think about it, I'm not sure about that. And you get confused, or you believe it because you trust in what I'm saying, you believe it because the scriptures say it, and Ajahn pointed it to very directly, you believe in all this. Belief is about words, concepts. You can be aware of what you believe. Awareness of beliefs, good beliefs or stupid beliefs, whatever. But you can't be aware of awareness because it's not an object. You can be aware, it's like this. Awareness, the word itself is another word, but it's apparent here and now, timeless. So this is, speaking like this is to encourage this sense of changing from just following tradition blindly and just trying to sort out your life according to the belief that you are, what your true nature is a very separate personality, separate form. We don't dismiss the separate forms, they're all different. So none of us look the same as somebody else, but the forms are anicca, impermanent, unsatisfactory, dukkha, anatta, not self. Consciousness is not self. Then what is self, if we're going to use that word? what you're left with when you let go of conditions of ignorance is knowing, conscious knowing. Timeless awareness is like this. And as you trust this, this is developing what we call the path. It becomes stronger and stronger. There's certainty. How could it be otherwise? Because you've explored, investigated. It's not about believing in this, but this is what we are, this awareness. Not these separate forms that we believe we are. So I offer this for your reflection.